first question is actually hopefully an easy one. Maybe it's a different patent from the Kirigami wheelchair, but you've got a lot of patents. Do you have a favorite one that you'd like to tell us about, or maybe the one that you're most proud of?
I don't have a favorite. That's like picking your favorite child. Usually most passionate about the one I'm working on now, but that's just because it's immediately in the midst of solving some problem. Maybe I'll just tell you about the two patents that landed me in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. One of them is the ergonomic push rim. And so the idea was that for decades, the first wheelchair push rims, that's the part that wraps around the wheel, attaches to the wheel to help propel a manual wheelchair, was basically based on wooden branches that you could, trim and bend into a hoop. And so that turns out to be like about 5 inches to 3/4 of an inch in diameter. And then, oddly enough, even as the push rims became steel and aluminum, they kind of used that same concept of just making a tubular hoop. Nobody really gave thought to, was that the best interface for propelling a manual wheelchair? But then it bothered me in the early 1980s with racing wheelchairs. And I was thinking, how do I go faster? And why is it this shape? So we varied size, and then I started playing around with different shapes. And then as I was in my PhD program, I learned that individuals that use wheelchairs developed a pretty high incidence of carpal tunnel syndrome or rotator cuff injuries. And I thought, wow, racing wheelchairs, they push over 100 miles a week. They don't really have these injuries at any higher rate than people that only push a few miles a week. There must be something to do with the ergonomics of the wheelchair. And so I started looking at how do you sit in the wheelchair and the push rim. And I developed a tool called the Smart Wheel, which allows us to study both wheelchair biomechanics and ergonomics, and is still in use today by labs around the world. And that led us to looking at ergonomic shapes. And that came out with two patents that are on the market as products. And the other cool thing is, you probably know from your experience, you've done something right, that when your patents expire, other people start to create knockoff products.
Mm.
And then,
Yep.
and there's also spin-off products. And then, of course, I can see our invention all over the world because of its commercial success and the subsequent success of the people who made what I want to call Me Too products. Right?